for Wisconsin's 8th Congressional District. The 8th District covers much of northeast Wisconsin. The purpose of this forum tonight is to hear from both candidates about issues important to the district. Some of you submitted topics of interest online for consideration tonight, and we thank you for that. We especially wish to thank Fox Valley Lutheran High School for hosting this event tonight. We also want to thank the candidates for appearing this evening, of course, Democratic Congressman Steve Kagan and Republican candidate Mr. Reed Ribble. Questions will be asked by our panelists. We have 3 of them tonight. Dan Flannery, Executive Editor of the Post-Crescent. Mike Kemeter, News Director of WHBY 1150 Radio. And Shirley Strange, President of the Appleton League of Women Voters. This is how it will work. We will begin this evening with opening statements. Both candidates will be allowed 2 minutes for an opening statement. Then we will begin with the first question. The candidate will be allowed 2 minutes for a response. Each question will have a follow-up question that will be allowed a 1-minute response. The other candidate will then be asked the same 2-minute question and a 1-minute general follow-up question. Then each candidate will be allowed 30 seconds for final thoughts on each topic. At the end of the evening, each candidate will have 1 minute for closing remarks. This format has been agreed to by both candidates, the League of Women Voters, and our co-sponsors tonight. We do have timekeepers in place. Time limits will be strictly enforced, just so you know. We do have a live audience tonight. We thank you for being here. There are house rules, though, folks. No campaign signs or campaign literature allowed in the theater. Cell phones, pagers, and any recording devices are to be turned off. Unauthorized videos or sound recordings not allowed tonight. Please refrain from applause, signs of displeasure, or other distractions. Please allow us the time to get all of the questions answered in tonight's program. My name is Cammie Rapson. I'm from WBAY TV2, and I'm serving as your moderator for tonight. A coin toss offstage determined which candidate would be starting this evening, and we will start with opening remarks from Mr. Reed Ribble.
Thank you very much, Cammie. Thank you to the panel, and thank you for joining us this evening. Thanks to the audience that decided to come out on a windy fall night in Wisconsin. It's been a privilege of mine to be a candidate for this position. I joined the race about a year ago, as many of you know, out of concern for my family. I was challenged last Christmas, actually Christmas of 2009, by my son, actually 2008, by my son, saying, "Dad, you always taught me that if I didn't like my circumstance in life, that I ought to go change it." And as I was complaining about the state of the economy, reckless spending in Washington, D.C., and ever-expanding government that encroaches on our liberty, I decided that I would go ahead and take that challenge. I was disappointed with where government was. I didn't like the station in life. I was concerned for my grandchildren. I have 2 of them, they're 5 and 7. And I'm very concerned about the future for them. What is the legacy of this generation of Americans? My father was a U.S. Marine in World War II. He passed away in 2002. And Tom Brokaw wrote a wonderful book about that generation, calling them the greatest generation. I wonder what a historian will say in 20 years from now about this generation of Americans that sat idly by as our government spent their future away. $13.2 trillion of national debt will be passed on to our children and grandchildren unless there's a change. I got in this race because I'm concerned for them. I got in this race because I want a better legacy for my generation. And I look very much forward to this evening and talking about these topics. Thank you very much to the League of Women Voters for having me, and I will look forward to talking with you tonight.
Mr. Ribble, thank you very much. Congressman Steve Kagan, your opening remarks tonight.
Well, thank you, Cammie, and thank you to everyone for putting on this event. It's very necessary that everyone have available all the facts of where people stand on the issues. I deeply appreciate this opportunity to be with you. 4 years ago, I did something for the first time in my life. I ran for public office as a small business owner and as a physician. I ran for office because our children were being sent off to war, because our jobs were being sent overseas, and because my patients did not have access to the care they needed just to survive. And now, as your representative, I'm working hard to clean up the biggest economic mess of our nation's history. I voted no to bailouts and yes to jobs. And remember this, I didn't start this fire, I'm working hard to put it out. I fought hard to bring a new VA hospital to Green Bay to better serve our veterans. I pushed back against China when they were dumping paper into our domestic marketplace illegally. taking away our paper industry. I've helped to save thousands of jobs for the paper industry by doing so. But there is much more work to do. People everywhere are still hurting. People need our help. But my opponent and I disagree on many of the issues. Reed says he's concerned about the debt, but he's already pledged to give tax cuts to millionaires and billionaires, which would add $700 billion more to our debt. That's not being fiscally responsible. It's certainly not being conservative fiscally. I'm protecting Social Security. My opponent has said he needs to phase it out. But this election really isn't about me, and it's not about Reed. It's really about the people in Northeast Wisconsin having someone who's on their side. Someone who's already stood up to Wall Street, big banks, big oil, and big insurance companies. We're going to make it in America. When we stop pointing fingers and start joining hands, amazing things are going to happen. Today, I'm humbly and respectfully asking for your vote. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Congressman Kagan. We will begin tonight with our first panelist, Dan Flannery from the Post-Crescent. He will be addressing this first question to Mr. Reed.
Thank you. Good evening, both of you, and thanks for participating. Let's start with your thoughts on job creation. The most recent numbers from the Bureau of Labor Statistics show that Wisconsin's unemployment rate is 7.8%. National unemployment is around 9.6%. That's about twice the levels of 2006, 2007. At the same time, the Bureau says that across the country there are about 1.2 million discouraged workers who no longer believe jobs are available for them and are looking for work. So clearly, job creation is on the top of every candidate's to-do list, but even some employed workers struggle to make ends meet because of wage concessions or other higher benefit costs. In 2 minutes, share some of your ideas, not your opponent's ideas, for creating good-paying jobs that will allow families to earn a living wage in order to be self-supporting.
Thank you for that question. That should be fairly easy because the Congress hasn't been, I should say this, the Congress has been neglect of ideas. Ideas have been absent in the Congress for creating jobs. This is the number one issue, Dan, and I'm really glad that you asked it. The government doesn't create jobs except those jobs that are in the public sector. They're particularly adept at creating government jobs and particularly inept at creating private sector jobs. But what the government is very, very good at is they are good at putting obstacles in the way of real job creation. And we need to look at what those obstacles are. The first one is a lack of clarity. There's no clarity coming out of the White House, no clarity coming out of the U.S. House of Representatives, no clarity coming out of the Senate about what the future should look like in this country. Without clarity, there can be no certainty. And so business owners are afraid to hire. I've had hundreds of business owners in the last year tell me, you know what, I think I'll just add some overtime right now instead. And so what the government needs to do is begin to remove those obstacles, whether it's in poorly managed tax law or oppressive regulations that have caused the problem that we're in. We need to remove the uncertainty. Bills that are partially passed, partially proposed, that will continue to restrict and discourage job creation in Wisconsin.
Mr. Turtle, as I recall, both of you are in some agreement that helping small business grow is the key to job growth overall. But there are differences on how that help should come. And I think specifically on trade policy, there are. As I recall, you believe corporate taxes should be lowered and that businesses endure too much regulation. To that latter point on regulation, how much regulation is appropriate to provide the proper protections and oversight, but not hurt business?
Well, I think that 78,000 pages of regulations per year is too much. It's clearly too much because we see the result. Nearly 15 million Americans unemployed. What I've been proposing is a 24-month moratorium on future regulation. Let's just put a stop to it for 24 months so that we can send some clarity and certainty to those small business owners. Let them know that the government, rather than declaring war on them, those are the words I heard from a manufacturer in Sturgeon Bay just a few weeks ago, that the government's declared war on them. That's a tragedy that a business owner would say that. Let's give them 24 months to breathe some clean air and go about creating jobs. That's what I would recommend.
Congressman Kagan, the initial question for you again is, share some of your ideas, not Mr. Ribbles, on creating good-paying jobs that allow families to earn a living wage to be self-supported.
Well, thank you very much for the question of our generation. But never forget how we fell into this economic recession. How did we get here? We had policies where there were 2 tax cuts to the wealthy without paying for it. We had 2 wars at the same time, didn't pay a dime for that either. We had a handout of $400 billion to big pharma, didn't pay for that either. And then at the tail end of the last administration, they cracked open the door of the Treasury and allowed their friends at Wall Street, Goldman Sachs and others, to take out nearly $1 trillion and didn't pay for that either. So we have a great deal of debt that has accumulated. We lost during the last administration a net of 433,000 jobs. During President Clinton's time, he had generated 22 million jobs. We're at the point today where the wealthiest 1% of our economy, those people own 83% of the stock on Wall Street, and 63% of households are struggling just to make it. They're living paycheck to paycheck. So never forget how we got in there. It was tax cuts to millionaires and billionaires, deregulation of Wall Street, and on top of that, tax loopholes that allowed our corporations on Wall Street to take our jobs and ship them to China and elsewhere. So we can't repeat the mistakes of the past. So everyone is angry, like I am, like Reed is, like everybody here and everyone watching, because everyone on Main Street today is being asked to pay for the mistakes of the speculators and gamblers on Wall Street who crashed our economy. So we can't have too much. We need effective regulation. We need to make sure that small business has access to the credit they need to grow our economy. 93% of all employers are small business. But today, the credit markets are frozen, so we need access to credit. We can't repeat those policies. In the House of Representatives, I helped to pass legislation to reinstate pay-as-we-go. Pay-as-we-go means we can't put any bill forward that isn't paid for, either by raising revenue or cutting other programs. It worked during President Clinton's time. It'll work over time, once again, to balance our budget.
A follow-up question for you, Congressman Kagan, is again on trade agreements. As I recall, you favor balanced trade agreements. And you say if we can produce goods in America, then we should be able to buy the goods that we produce in America. Won't that raise costs for consumers, and aren't there issues inherent with that?
Well, costs are going up now in any case. We've got some mild inflation, but look at what we already have done. The HIRE Act, it used to be called the Hiring Act that I had written. It became the HIRE Act, and it provided for businesses a tax credit for hiring somebody who's been out of work. This is what we call lowering the cost of labor, to make sure that the overhead costs go down for business. We also voted to close tax loopholes that these corporations have been using to ship our jobs overseas. Yes, we need balanced trade. I put forward a bill that would guarantee that if you want to sell paper in our domestic market, then you should manufacture with good manufacturing practices, including taking our clean air and clean water standards. China can't compete with us unless they manipulate the currency value, unless they continue to provide subsidies illegally outside of our trade laws. So we have to push back against China with their unbalanced and unfair advantages. And that's what I'm working so hard to do.
Mr. Ribble, your final thoughts on this topic.
Yeah, I think you have to compare, if we're going to look at the Clinton administration and Bush administration, it was the last 2 years during the Pelosi-Kagan Congress that we lost the jobs. And it was in the Clinton years with the Republican-held Congress that we created those jobs. And there are key philosophical differences in regard to that. And it was lower regulations. As far as the freezing up of credit, that is a regulatory problem. And that's part of the reason that small businesses aren't creating jobs.
Congressman Kagan, your final thoughts?
Yes, well, if we pay as we go, we're going to live within our means in Washington, the same way we do around our kitchen tables each and every month when we pay our bills. More importantly, I put forward an amendment that passed unanimously in the House of Representatives that would allow small banks, not Wall Street, but small banks, to spread out their potential losses over time and keep loans functional, keep them active, don't call them in. Access to credit. We have a cash, credit, and confidence crisis right now in our country, and it's small banks and small business that will lead us forward.
Thank you both.